and to remove the park requirement for graduation. And then my last point is, and I thought it was curious that some parents relating to park, when they have opted their child out of the park exam, just recently received letters from the district suggesting that one of the options for them would be to retake algebra, a full year of algebra, and then also retake the park test. So parents are getting a little confused about why they would receive information like that just because they're exercising their right of refusal. And then my last point, which is 5 seconds, is, back to school night for everybody is, it's crazy and it's congested and there's a lot going on. And I know that in my case, it's not fun to come out of school and find that our cars have been leafleted with flyers from the local politicians, people running for township committee. I know that parents have complained to you, and
I think we'll be able to address that after public comment.
I hope so, because it was not fun to see that, and the litter was everywhere. And so I know that it's a violation of school policy on our grounds, and I wish that were addressed sooner. Thank you.
Is there other public comment on non-agenda items?
James Vopel, 20 Evergreen Place. During the summer, I made a proposal to the board with respect to adding the addendums to the agenda online. So far, the addendums have not been added, as far as I can tell. It's real easy to do. Just slide it in, scan it in, put it out there. It's quite simple, so I'm hoping that will start with tonight's meeting. With respect to the Effective School Solutions presentation on Wednesday night, it's a presentation for parents called Nurtured Heart, Catch a Child Being Good. And I was wondering if staff will be required at some point to also attend that workshop slash presentation, because I think we need to promote a 360-degree approach, especially in the elementary schools. I'm well aware of things that need to be done in elementary schools, being that I'm an elementary school teacher. And I think that constantly looking at a child's behavior in a negative light in both the social aspect and the academic aspect is really not helping them. And I think that we need to promote positive behaviors and give them positive feedback. And also too, in Mr. Markarian's data crunching, just one of the slides with the high school talking about, I guess, character education lessons and whether or not it had an impact, and it was basically a subpar answer. I'll be very interested to look at the climate in terms of how character education is viewed in the elementary schools to see if this is something that we can promote as a district, as like a district-wide theme across all the elementary schools, just to catch people doing good things, because I don't think that is bad. I think it's going to enhance the elementary school climates and make it better for all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm short. Stacy Letty, 67 Spencer Road. I had a couple of questions. The first is regarding what you guys were talking about, or what Mr. Markarian was talking about regarding high school and vaping. And I know that there's been some discussion sort of around about the possibility that the kids are using the vapes for other than nicotine purposes. And it got me thinking that, we had a whole discussion as a district, and we did some things at the high school regarding the Somerset County police dogs that came in unannounced to the schools. There was a lot of discussion about it, and those dogs came in once, I think, maybe twice. And then it just kind of went away, and I wondered why that was and why we're not still participating in that program, because it seemed that there was a lot of public support for that, and I just wanted to maybe consider that that's something we can bring back, because I know I have a kid in high school. I know that, the kids are using the vapes for, and we really should try to nip it in the bud a little bit. The second two issues I wanted to talk about were regarding the middle school, and one is regarding the PTO committee. There was a very, very significant amount of chatter this week and last week regarding a PTO fundraiser that's going on at Annan, that if the kids don't participate in the fundraiser, that the effect of them not participating is they don't get a ticket to a magic show that is being performed during school hours, which is effectively putting, we're supposed to be trying to find ways to take pressure off of our kids, and we've now put this pressure on our kids. I know personally I have a sixth grader who's a little bit stressed about the transition to sixth grade, and when he looked at the fundraiser, he's like, I just can't deal with this. And so the effect is that now the rest of his classmates are gonna go to a show in the middle of the school day, and he and whoever else didn't participate is gonna be sitting in class. And there's just something wrong with that. I'm all for fundraisers. I know how important it is. I was a PTO president, but there's got to be a better way to encourage fundraising than excluding kids from things that are happening during the school hours. And the last is kind of a even more important issue. I know that you guys are aware that there was some controversy after the William Annan School back to school night about the changes to the gym curriculum that just suddenly appeared. That all of a sudden, the kids have grades in gym, which doesn't really bother me. I don't care if my kid gets an A, B, or C in gym. That doesn't bother me. But what's really worrisome is that all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the kids are getting written assessments in gym. And I understand that there is an underlying issue. We did speak to, a bunch of us reached out to Mrs. Hudak about it. I understand there's an issue with the teachers needing to be assessed based on state guidelines, and I know that that's important. But written assessments in gym for a bunch of kids that were supposed to be taking stuff off of their plate just seems a little excessive to me. I know that kids have already taken the little assessments and not done well with them. It just seems kind of odd that that didn't go through you guys, that it never went for a vote. It didn't seem to go to curriculum committee. And in addition, we haven't heard from Mr. Shello about what the redraw of the health curriculum was supposed to be. And based on what we saw at Annan at Back to School Night, it doesn't seem like that's changed a lot. So I just wanted to ask you guys to address what's going on with that and whether or not you're aware of this gym curriculum change. That's it.
Thank you.
My name is Al Licata. I'm a Basking Ridge resident. A couple of things. One, I came before you a little while back talking about the community service program in the school system where the kids are mandated to do community service. I reached out and had a conversation via email with Mr. Markarian. In my specific instance, the Chamber of Commerce did get added to the list. I would like to see the availability of other local groups that offer community service hours to have accessibility to get on this list, this preferred list where the kids can go on the internet, where they're going to the Home Access Center and clicking on the link, and all these places are looking. If you haven't gone and looked at the list, there's places up and down the state that are on this list. But local businesses or local nonprofits that can offer these kids these hours to do at all different times of the year aren't on the list. Now, I'm also told that, well, if the student comes to the teacher and says, look, I know this business, or let's give an example, the visiting nurse. It's not on the list, but if the student brings the form to the teacher, they can get that approved. Well, it shouldn't be the student finding the business. It should be them clicking on the link and already seeing that organization on the list. It should be available to every student to know that, for example, the visiting nurse is looking for volunteers, or the Chamber of Commerce, or the Lions Club, or who have you. So I'm trying to find a way that maybe we could work together, willing to help and volunteer, to make sure that the accessibility and the knowledge that these organizations can have is there's one point person at the school to contact, you fill out a form, get approved by you guys, and get on that list. After all, I mean, we're all working in the same direction to help the kids get their hours in and fulfill the requirements, but also build a pride in their community about giving back and build that instill that feeling of giving back to the kids. I think we're all on the same page. If there's a better way to do that, I'm all in favor of it, and I would work and volunteer to support that with you. Secondly, I'm a 22-year coach in this town. I am a parent. I am very active in the community. Address the vaping issue. We all know what we're talking about. We're talking about the possibility of drugs coming into the schools through the vaping process. Take care of it now before we have an incident where we have to deal with it as a community. That's all I'm saying. I think there's been enough talk about it. Sooner rather than later would be much preferred. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello there. I haven't spoken before. I'm kind of nervous about the whole thing, but I can't help myself. Listening to everyone here, I just had a couple of thoughts. Jen Donahoe, I have 4 kids in the Bernards Township school system, 1 in elementary, 2 at William Annan, and my oldest, is a freshman at Ridge. So I just wanted to say that Camp Bernie was back this year for my 6th grader, and it was a really big hit for him. So I really wanted to, I know there was a lot of commentary from the public about this program and that it was taken away in 5th grade, and I was really someone who was pushing the advocacy to have it pulled back into the school. So it was a really nice time for my son. He met a lot of kids that he had not had interaction with before, so I applaud whomever made this program back for the kids in 6th grade. And also, I just wanted to say my daughter participated in an assembly as a freshman at Ridge. I understand it was a gentleman who was speaking in regard to bullying, and he used different characters and experiences in his lifetime. And my daughter said that the tone of the entire program just really struck all of the students that were participating. She said typically kind of what the conversation has been centered around is, don't bully. If you bully, you're bad. We're going to find out about it. If you're on social media and you bully, we're going to know you're a bad person if you do it. She said, but like the nuances of how this assembly was different was that it was kind of saying it's those very subtle situations that you may not recognize you're bullying someone that has this long-term effect on a person. And she said a lot of people were pretty emotional, and it kind of made you introspective maybe about some of your social situations and interactions, especially in social media. So I thought that was really helpful, and I would love to see that continue, and that sort of kind communication with the kids. And then finally, sports. I have kind of 4 what I'm proud to say are average kids, maybe not excelling academically or athletically, but, having a healthy, happy experience through the school system. And sports is part of that. That's helped them socially meet other kids. And I saw, Mr. Markarian, when you were talking about the feedback, that something that a lot of the Ridge High School kids get a lot of pride out of was sports. And I think at William Annan, what Laura was talking about with the fields and some of the opportunities that may be available, that we can expand on having some kids who may not feel that they can make one of the William Annan teams is kind of opening some other opportunities for some club access for kids at that tough years of middle school. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment before I close this section?
This is the first time I'm speaking, so bear with me. Safety seems to be everyone's.
Can we
Safety seems to be.
we need your name and address
sure,
first,
and
please? You can sign in afterwards.
Drive. Mr. Markarian, you know me through emails, Mr. McLaughlin as well. It's regarding, my daughter had an incident on a bus, and I think she went through the right channels, and it went up to Mr. Markarian, Mr. McLaughlin, and I know there's video cameras on those buses. She's a good kid. I believe her story. But what came back to me was, we believe that there was no incident on the bus, and she feels marginalized, and that her voice wasn't heard. And I keep everyone saying safety, 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 but where is her safety if her word isn't even being, reviewed? And I would like to know what's going on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? All right, so I am going to close public comment on non-agenda items, and we got a lot to address. I think I can handle a few of them. I want to start with Mrs. Donahoe, who was very nice to come up for the first time and address us. You used the term kind communication. I'd like to thank you for your kind communication and some positive feedback on some of the things we're doing. It's always appreciated. Regarding the issues about the rotating drop schedule, the board has not committed anything financially yet. We're still in the very beginning stages of exploring the possibility and the impact of the program. If you stick around for board forum, we're going to be talking a little bit more about that, but we're just at the very beginning stages. As far as the technology plan, if I remember correctly, the plan didn't propose any technology going into K-2. It would only be 3 to 5 in the elementary level. But that, too, the board has not approved any plan at this point. Our next steps is over the next month, we're going to be visiting classrooms and seeing the impact of the technology on student success, how the teachers rely on them. And then once we've had a chance to actually see them in action, we're going to come back, review the plan, and make board recommendations on that. As far as building our relationships with legislators, if you were here, and you can certainly play back the tape, we had some strong conversations with our legislators about the removal of Park. We get the sense that it is going away. We didn't come out right and say we don't want to take Park. We put it in the context of we need a meaningful standardized test for our students, and we got the response that they agree whatever the test may be, which is a different message than we have received before, which we find promising. The reality is, with the elections coming up, the state legislators aren't doing anything. So it's going to be a dead period until after the election. Regarding political flyers being placed on cards at back to school night, I'm going to defer to our counsel, Mr. Crute, who has advised us on this issue.
It's okay. I can use this one. While it may not seem like it, it's actually a very complex constitutional question. And I heard a comment about board policy. I'm actually not aware of a board policy that specifically addresses the question of leafleting at parent or evening programs or things not during the school day. There are board policies which I think are enforceable with respect to not distributing political literature and things through students. And clearly, if that was being done through, through students during the school day, that's something we can control. But the subject of leafleting on public property when people have access to public property for public events is actually a First Amendment issue. And there have been federal lawsuits that have gone up to the United States Courts of Appeals in various circuits of the United States that have dealt with that issue. And interestingly, some people have used raised the question of all their littering, and even that subject was brought up in some of those federal lawsuits in an attempt to try to control it. Municipalities or school districts would try to argue that it was a littering issue and they were trying to control littering. And it really got down to constitutional standards with respect to restriction of freedom of speech, and that most cases, public entities, including school districts, are a limited public forum, at least, in which certain types of expressions are allowed. And it's very difficult to, in that type of environment, to try to restrict things based on their content, and essentially just trying to, foreclose political literature from being distributed on public property at a time when there's public access would probably run afoul of those legal standards that we have.
I know that's a lot of legal talk, but basically we were advised that it is not something that as a district we should attempt to stop. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, regarding adding addendums to our online information, I'm going to assume that request is after the meetings, because a lot of these addendums show up right before we show up. And I think that's a really easy fix that we will remind our administrative staff to do. Regarding situations involving individual students, we do not discuss them in public forums. Regarding our community service program, which I think is outstanding. I can speak from personal experience. When my children had the opportunity, there was an extensive list for them to reference, and they were also encouraged if they had something off the list that interested them, they were welcome to approach their teacher and see if it was viable. I'm sure if you have some real solid ideas that you think would enhance the program as well as the community, you're welcome to address me or the board as a whole, and we will forward your information along to our social studies department and see if we can get some additions to the list. I think this is all that I am able to address, and I know I noted a few things that maybe Mr. Markarian can address.
So I know one issue that came up was the issue of letters to parents regarding park. There are some nuances, if you will, some things that the state is trying to help clarify that are very specific to timelines and tests. And the way that we've tried to approach those with parents is on an individual basis with information that we have. If we don't have any information, we haven't approached parents. For example, sophomores this year that didn't take English language arts as freshmen, we don't have any information. There's nothing to approach parents about. There were some specific situations with respect to algebra as a high school level park test that we did send some individual letters to parents about. And those letters were designed to be a informational notice to try to make sure that we were doing a good job of sharing whatever information we had about some of these one-off situations that are going to continue to crop up for the time being. And those parents were given specific contact information so that they could contact people that could explain those specific circumstances. So we can, I'll certainly follow up with Mr. Scello. I don't know that there's a curriculum change so much as an assessment practice that the staff wanted to do at William Adam Middle School. The aspect of the vaping, we've already tried to begin to address that issue by recognizing that the devices that the students are using to do the vaping are drug paraphernalia. And so when students are caught with those devices, it enacts this suspicion-based policy, and the students have to go out for a drug test. So we've kind of captured the situation in terms of including those devices amongst the other items that would be considered something that would trigger the students to have to get a drug screening. And so I think we've made the steps in the right direction. Obviously, you know, it's not a perfect situation to try to have to manage, because some of these things are odorless and they have no smell, or they smell like sweet bubble gum. So it's definitely a challenging area, and one that all the districts in the state and the nation, I imagine, are dealing with. Oh, right, the middle school fundraiser. So, you know, I did get a correspondence about that issue, and I can tell you that I know that I believe it's the magazine drive that's been going on at Annan for many years. As long as I've been in the district, I can remember it happening. In terms of the incentive items that you know, are involved in the fundraiser, all I can say is I can ask Mrs. Hudak to take a look at that and see if she feels like something is unreasonable. I get the idea of the magic show and some being able to and some not, but it's been in place. It's been a successful fundraiser for a long time. I have to ask Rich about this. I thought it was just a grading issue.
Yeah. As far as an overview of the health curriculum summer writing that was being done, I know that it's scheduled to be reviewed with the board later this year, but off the top of my head, I don't know the date.
Bev,
I think Mr. Shello's coming on Friday to curriculum.
Oh, great. So Mr. Shello is going to be reporting to curriculum this Friday, so at our next public meeting or the meeting thereafter, it'll be reported out. And then regarding effective school solutions, I know one of the reasons why we brought them on is in addition to all the resources and support they're providing to our students, they put on the table both parent training and staff training. I don't necessarily think the staff is going to be required to come to a parent presentation in the evening, but I do know that one of the things that we are asking them to do this year is staff training. I don't know if anything specific has been scheduled yet, but that's one of the reasons why we have brought them on for the year, to see how that all works. Okay. All right, so board forum, and I have two things before I open it up to everyone, and one is sort of a process thing that popped up tonight, and it's regarding the climate survey process. We spoke briefly when we were sitting out in the audience. I'm sure many of you, like myself, have strong thoughts on things that popped out at you, things that are maybe long-term improvements or programs, some things that are maybe quick and easy fixes. And I wanted to just have a conversation with everyone on the best process to collect that information so it doesn't, fall by the wayside quickly. Does it make the most sense to channel your feedback to Mr. Markarian and he can present the list to the SEL committee at their next meeting? Or can you think of a better process to collect feedback?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So,
So should we add it to Thursday's agenda or the following?
Maybe the November
considering we've only gone over
The next
one
one after
of
that, right?
5 surveys,
That's what I mean.
I can think of a few things off the top of my head with Ridge, but I think it would be good if we peruse
time
all of
to
it.
look.
Understanding that the programs and the execution are primarily going to be the responsibility of each building's safety team, but I think from our perspective, maybe we can kind of note some things that we'd like to see as priorities as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense if all the board members look at all the survey results and then funnel the questions to the SEL committee. I don't know that, that Mr. Markarian has to compile all the questions.
I was going to say, I'll
Whoever's running
volunteer
the
to
meeting that we're going to
collect
talk
it.
about it, because we've been taking turns.
Did-
Whoever's on for that month, yeah.
Whichever one of us is on for November,
collect
maybe we could just share that with the board through weekly notes and then have them direct, I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah. So who are we going to direct?
Can we just double check? We have
Okay.
a rotating responsibility of minutes.
Okay, so on Thursday, in the SEL committee, you will talk about the process and then communicate with the board as a whole. Mr. Fry, did you have?
I thought the objective was the safety committee or group would look at this and then come up with, areas that were critical. And then that would then become our list to start determining which might be easier or which might be the best or whatever. So
I think that we're talking more about just compiling questions from the board, because we had to look at that really quickly tonight, and we only looked at one school. So as board members sit and look at it more closely, they might have questions that didn't get answered tonight about the actual survey. So then we could clarify that in the SEL minutes, if people all had the same types of questions. I don't think we were talking about making a plan, recommendations at this point. We were talking about questions from the board. Does that make sense?
If I can give you an example, like something that popped out at me on the very last page of the presentation, our students on the issue of how to manage my academic stress skewed very heavily on the disagree side. So to me, that popped out as an issue that's going to need to be addressed. As a board, it's not our job to say, this is the program we need and this is how we're going to do it, but I think it's certainly appropriate to provide feedback to the administration at Ridge that this is an issue that might be of concern to the board, depending on how the majority feels. So as their safety team meets, it's something that might be on their radar, although I suspect it probably already is in this particular example.
we are going to do the same thing the safety board is going to do.
No, we're going to go over the survey results from the different buildings and issues and concerns that are apparent to us as board members, as an individual, will be provided to the SEL committee, who will compile a board list of issues and concerns that have come out as a result of the climate survey. Does
Okay.
that make sense?
I understand what you're saying. Like you're saying like we're going to do it. If we suggest too much, then, if we give them a list of our concerns, are they going to take that and then not really, you know what I mean? Like, will they take them, not too, I don't want to say too seriously because that's not the right word, like, so if we look at our concerns.
It's really questions.
I thought it was more questions. Like,
Okay,
we were
well,
just
I
going to
mean,
make sure we
That
understood
is,
all of it.
that's a legit concern you had,
Yeah.
because it wasn't really a
No, I know what
question,
you're
it was more of a
saying. Yeah.
concern. So if I had a question about how is this question asked or how is this question answered, that's a different story. If you're gonna look at it and say, oh, I saw that all these kids, are stressed out, and then we're gonna say, well, what about that? Are we leading? That's all. Is that like a leading thing to the safety team, where that we're kind of pushing our own, I don't know, that's just how I'm understanding, but if that's not the case, that's fine. If we're just doing it for our own, if everyone has questions that you haven't thought of, it's different.
Yeah. Say that into the microphone, please.
So I think you have to, I think to your point, right, and to what John's saying, you have professionals at the schools that need to have the opportunity to work on this and make their action plans for what they believe is appropriate for their school. And they may need to take some deeper dives into this. And remember what I said at the beginning when I was presenting it was that sometimes a survey like this that's big and broad means that you're going to take a look at something else and you may want to do a whole nother survey. So the action steps that they want to take as individual school teams for their school's climate survey results need to be driven by the schools. Now, if the board members have questions, obviously, fine, that's no problem. And the SEL committee can be a great place to have questions answered. And we can certainly provide progress reports on how things are going and what we're doing over time. And obviously, if the board has concerns, they can share concerns. But I think the schools have to have the opportunity to respond to their own climate survey results.
Yeah, that's what,
Yeah.
that's fine.
And, it's up to each individual board member to go as deep or as cursory as you want. I'm a survey person, and a lot of things jumped out at me that I had questions about. Other board members might be more content to see what comes to us before we move forward.
You
It's
don't
up-
mean you're compiling stuff and then giving it to these?
No.
No, it's just,
It's just
yeah,
for us to.
Mr. Burnham?
I think the survey showed many, many areas of concern, at least on my part. There were educational issues, not just stress. Yes, we had the 3 suicides in the last 24 months or whatever it is, but the SEL committee is suddenly into how do you run the district? And there's 4 board members on it. This is my opinion. And I think this belongs, when you're talking about the whole district and the whole program, et cetera, I think it's a full board discussion. Now, that's not the way the 4 people who are running the board. Let me finish. That's not the way the SEL committee would like to have it, but I think there's a number of complex issues, and they go way, way beyond the suicide issue. It goes on what is education today, and are we competitive with the other schools? Are we preparing the kids for college? There were so many issues in that presentation today, and all we did was the high school.
Right, and that's why we're asking all the board members to go read the rest of it so we can have a full board discussion about all of it.
No, you're not talking about the full board discussion. You're talking, and they'll be given to the SEL committee.
That was just
And
to
then
answer
wait-
questions
wait-
if someone
wait a minute.
didn't understand
And
something.
then
We can
we get
have
a-
a full board discussion
wait a
after
minute.
we all read it.
And then we get a very limited feedback without the discussion of what the SEL committee is deciding. And I have a big problem with that. And I think the community ought to be privileged to participate in these discussions as well, because you're talking about the whole district. So that's my 2 cents. Suicide, yes. SEL, if you can identify the things that are causing the kids to commit suicide, yes. But if you're talking about the whole program, I don't think it belongs at the committee level. So
I think
that's my
hopefully
2
the
cents.
people in the public here that are interested will also read it because it's going to be on the website. So then everyone will have access to all of the data so that we can discuss it. I think that's all we're saying.
We do
Mike.
very little of that anymore. It's done in committees and in private.
I'm sorry, but we can't finish on that. That is
No, we can't.
absolutely categorically false. There is no private discussion going on that is not that is withheld in any way from board members that are not on any specific committee.
Just to respond, and I think a great deal of you, Karen, because you give me about 2 hours every couple months to explain what the curriculum committee is really doing, because at the board level, I don't understand your presentations. And you are good enough that you'll sit with me and explain, oh, this is what this means. This is what that means. This was what was discussed at the meeting. Super. I can't thank you enough. But the SEL committee, to date, has not been doing that. Now, if you're willing to do that for me, too, for the SEL committee, that's wonderful. But I don't get the feedback. And once again, I don't want to be arguing with you. I want to thank you. So
I think it's really nice that, that Mrs. Gray has spent the time to read through the minutes from the committee that the rest of us are all reading, and that's great that she's willing to do that. But the rest of us are reading it, and we have questions we could ask. We occasionally have a question, so we ask, but most of the time we read the minutes and we understand them.
And
I'm not on this board to read minutes.
But you
I'm
need
on
to
this
be. It's
board
your
to try.
responsibility.
Now, wait a minute.
That's a responsibility of a board member,
I'm
Mr.
on
Byrne,
this
to read your
board
minutes.
to try and make comments on what I think is going on.
But you
And
have to do your
I just
homework and
made
read
the
the
comments on what I think is going on.
Mike, but it's not reasonable for you to say what you said, and I'm happy to take the time to sit down and go over them with you. However, I don't want to negate in any way the fact that the other 7 people in the room are reading the minutes and mostly are following what is going on in the minutes without me sitting down with any of them at any time. And if I get an occasional question, maybe by email, or if I see someone at another committee meeting, we discuss it just the same way that if I happen to see Linda or she sends something, I'm sorry, Mrs. Wildridge, from finance, and I'm not sure about it, I ask about that, and she clarifies for me, and so on with other committee chairs. But it's not reasonable, again, to suggest that secrets are being kept or that what's in the written minutes that everyone else is reading isn't satisfying their curiosity or need to understand what happened at that meeting. For you, it takes a little extra time and effort, and that's fine, but it's not okay to accuse other people or to accuse the board of not having a full discussion or not fully disclosing what's happening at committee meetings, because we are.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
I'm aware of that.
Yeah. Let the record reflect that a board member responsibility is to read the minutes ahead of time to come prepared to meetings to discuss the relevant issues. If you come to the meeting without reading the minutes, then you're not prepared to discuss the relevant issues.
I didn't say that I don't read the minutes. In fact, I got a couple minutes in my folder when I got to the meeting today, so I didn't get a chance to read them. But what I am saying is the full board should have the benefit of discussion. And if it's going on behind closed doors at the SEL committee, that's a problem, because these are issues so important that the full board and the community ought to be hearing and participating in.
All right. In light of the fact that we need some full board discussions, the next board forum topic is the rotating drop schedule. And we talked about our process because it's all encompassing over every area that the board oversees via our committee structure. So step 1 in this process is each of the individual committee chairs collected questions as they pertained to the rotating drop schedule in their area of responsibility. And Mr. Markarian has brought that to share with everyone. You don't have to read all of it, but maybe from a high level. So everyone gets a feel for what's going to be discussed in committee. Oh, and we have printouts for everyone regarding the rotating drop.
And we have to give me a half an hour so I can read this.
So just process-wise, I'm sharing this with the board members for the first time tonight. So, Mr. Byrne, you're not going to be the only one that hasn't seen these, because chairs of committees sent me these questions because I said that I would collect them. And I certainly don't think that, you're going to zip through these questions and absorb them all in a minute, nor do I have all the answers to all of these questions. prepared. It's just a starting point for you to see as a board what the committees are going to be talking about relative to the issues that they have questions about in their different areas, whether it be curriculum or finance or otherwise. What I'd like to propose to try to do is work on collecting the answers to all of these questions in a way that the committees can work on it, and also in a way that I can present it to the board as a whole. And I would propose to do so probably on December 18th at that board meeting.
And I want to thank everyone, because I know I sit on 2 committees, and there was a flurry of information back and forth among committee members to come up with the best possible lists of questions on how their area dealt with the rotating drop. Are there any other topics for board forum tonight? Mr. Fry?
I just have a comment about something.
Oh, sure.
If I could. I think we should recognize one of our staff members. I became aware of an art teacher at Liberty Corner School, and Alicia Bino, who recently received the award for the Elementary Art Educator of the Year. And I think these type of things should be congratulated. And I would wish that we would do a lot more of this when the opportunity arises.
I just quietly asked Mr. Markarian if maybe we could bring her to a future board meeting. I know my children and a few of other people sitting here, our children, had the benefit of having her as a teacher, and she's absolutely wonderful. I thank you for bringing that up.
Just in fairness to our staff, sometimes coming to board meetings, it may be something that they would like to do, and it may not be something that they would like to do, or they may not be available to do it. So certainly can offer them that, and if they are, great, and if they're not, we can put something in writing for them on behalf of the board.
That's their option.
Any other thoughts, questions, comments, topics for board forum? Then may I have a motion for adjournment, please? Mrs. Wooldridge, may I have a second? Mrs. McEwen, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Then we are adjourned. Thanks, everyone, for coming out tonight.